There we go. Welcome back to another episode of What Are You? I'm Ray.
Hello. I'm Asha.
There you go. And then our special guest, Em. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing well. Excited to be here again. I know it's been a minute.
Yay. And then for those who haven't heard from Em, would you want to give like a short little intro on yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Em Alves. I'm the Violence Prevention Education Coordinator at the Phoenix Center at Auraria, which is your on-campus interpersonal violence support and education office. And so we serve students, staff, and faculty. So please find our information in the episode description, and we will get connected with you if you're in need of our services. My pronouns are they, them, and I think it's been a really long time since I clarified what my mixed background is on this podcast. Like maybe last year I did it. So I'm of Puerto Rican and Guyanese descent.
There you go. Wonderful.
Hello. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Really excited for today's topic.
Yes, no, it's something you and I have had several conversations about.
Yes. And I'm so glad that it's finally a podcast episode.
Yes. And so for today's and for next episode, we're going to be doing a crossover event, which I always love. So we're going to be doing the podcast episode for the MBSA, What Are You podcast. And then next week, we will be hopping on over to the Phoenix Center podcast, which I'm really excited about. So for today's topic, we're going to be talking about true crimes, which I do not know much about, but I do know they are a super huge fad, super huge like trend. Like I've been seeing people doing TikToks where they would be doing makeup and like talking about murders. I've been seeing YouTubers doing it. I think like one of the most famous podcasts right now, I guess, is My Favorite Murder. I listened to like a few episodes during the holiday season because I was watching Anastasia, and one of my friends had mentioned about the Rasputin family and the assassination of the Rasputin family, and so they were doing an episode on that. So I listened to it, and like the reason why like I just haven't gone into like podcasts as much is because they'll say some wild things that will actually be happening. And I'll just do casual things like cooking and just like listening on like a speaker or something like that. And then I'll hear something and then slowly turn my head and like, what happened?
It just goes into a what did he say?
Yeah.
Moment. Yeah.
But yeah, no, like definitely podcasts for me, like, you know, for true crimes, like that will exactly happen. Like I'll listen to them and be like, yo, this is wild. What? It's like, my gosh.
And
like,
imagine that pre-pandemic, like I unfortunately often would accidentally like play a podcast on my phone in the middle of a bus, and it was like always a true crime podcast, and it would be like some really graphic, horrible thing, and I was like, I promise I'm normal. Oh my god. So embarrassing.
It's just like taking notes.
But yeah, no, I guess I want to like hear your thoughts of like what got you started on like, you know, listening to true crimes, what makes you love true crimes and what makes you like addicted to them. Not addicted, but like definitely like, you know, loving them for sure.
Oh, maybe a little too obsessed. Yeah. No, that's fair. That's definitely a fair question. So for me, I was introduced to true crime through my father. So he used to watch court TV literally nonstop all the time. And so he would do this thing that I like don't really recommend anyone else ever do to a child, is that like, you know, between the ages of like 3 to 10, he would like call me into his room and be like, watch this. And he'd just like, he'd play it and then he'd be like, that could happen to you. So, and yeah, like, so, which is like, you hear, it's very, so do you see why I have anxiety? So I think that my dad definitely had like more positive intentions when he was doing that. I think he
Wow.
wanted to, like, especially as an immigrant to this country, I think he thought I was like very naive about like things that happen in the world. And so like, which is weird because we grew up in Miami, and it's like Miami is not exactly like the most innocent place in the world. But like for someone who was growing or like, you know, came here in the formative years to New York City, he had just seen so much crime and had experienced it so much. And I think he was trying to like prepare me for the real world. But I think, you know, ultimately what it ended up doing was trigger a career path that he did not want me to go on in terms of specializing in violence and injury prevention as a social worker. And then turned into me just watching nonstop crime procedurals, true crime television, podcasts, you name it. So it's really been a lifelong obsession that I am critical of, though I do enjoy it.
Wow.
Okay. Lots of process there. Glad you're here now. We're needed in what you do. So thank you. No matter how much the, you know,
The
details.
90s was just scared
Yeah.
everybody. Like, I think that's what it was. It was just like, it's 9 p.m. Where's your child? It's like,
yes,
come here,
that's
come here.
truly. And I think especially for my family, like coming from the Caribbean, and I've talked to other Caribbean folks about this. It's like, and Ray, you're Caribbean as well, right?
Colombian and Panamanian, but yeah.
Panamanians kind of pretty.
Yeah.
I know a lot of Panamanians who consider themselves Caribbean. So like it very much for me felt like a culture of fear, of like always wanting to be safe, always like, you know, having to be aware of everything that's going on around you and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that like it really, for me, what continued my obsession with true crime is that also like I had to kind of understand what makes people capable of these kinds of things too, because I had just grown up kind of immersed in the idea that this is always what people are doing.
No, that's really interesting. I think we just blew Ray's mind.
Like,
right
always.
Well, yes. I mean, these people there was this serial killer, you know, woman who was doing hospice care. She went undetected for 11 years after she had already committed a murder on the same freaking street that she was on, undetected for 11 years. Yeah, no, people are always doing this, and it's the ones who get caught that we find out about. But there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people in the world doing these things. Anywho, in terms of my true crime interest, I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm like super fixated or like obsessed with everything. I just find out about something, I get curious, and what really, I don't know, what I'm interested in finding out about is the events that led up to what transpired. So the true crime outlets that I kind of like subscribe to, they're mostly through YouTube. Brittany Vaughn, Eleanor Neal, of course, my favorite Bailey Sarian, which pioneered the makeup and true crime thing. I just want to put that out there. Give credit where credit is due.
Yeah, I had no idea that was a thing until you told me about it, Aja, because I was definitely like more in the classic podcast realm. So that was really fascinating to find out about.
Yeah, no, and it's a cross between things that I'm interested in, which obviously makeup. I wear it every time I'm on here. I wear it every day. I have my whole makeup box in the back, everything. But the ones that I follow talk about, you know, the childhood, the events, the trauma inflicted that kind of built to this crescendo of what would happen, or how that person's mindset was at the time when they committed these things. And that kind of psychology is interesting to me because, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about intersectionality, and I come at things with more of like an equity lens. So when learning about the traumas, then I kind of process it a little bit more, and then I don't know, it just works to piece the puzzles together for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I relate to that, because to me it's like when we learn about the childhoods, when we learn about like the history and how someone got to the point where they're caught, like to me there's usually so many points of intervention that could have happened along the way that could have stopped this person ever getting to this level of
Especially when you have the
harmful and
trifecta.
abusive. Yeah. Do you want to? Ooh, yeah. For
Do you
folks
want
who
to
don't,
go ahead?
Yeah, I don't know like what this is. What is the trifecta?
Alrighty, take it away.
Okay, so I might mess this up because it's been a minute since I've talked about it, but it's usually an abusive childhood, a traumatic brain injury, and ooh, what's the third?
Like,
Yeah, what's the third thing?
Animal abuse.
Animal abuse. Okay. Okay, because usually I mess that up sometimes, because for a long time, instead of saying traumatic childhood,
It's the
people used to
McDonald
say
triad.
the McDonald triad.
Yes.
the what?
So the first one is being cruel or abusive to animals, setting fire to objects, and committing other minor acts of arson, and regularly wetting the bed. So that's the
Oh.
McDonald trifecta.
I was thinking
so
of
it's different.
So
Triad.
all those things,
Excuse me, not trifecta.
like, lead to the possibility of someone being potentially on a true crimes like podcast.
Well, it can indicate whether someone will grow up to be a serial killer or some kind of violent criminal or a psychopath.
Oh, wow.
And it's not the only thing. Like I mentioned, like the traumatic childhood, traumatic brain injury is a big one. And for a long time, people also used to say not specifically traumatic childhood, but would say like abrasive or controlling mother, which like just felt like another way to just be like, really, this is all women's fault. Right? Like,
well, there are some cases where I've been like, what are you? Sorry, what?
Totally, which is, I think is really interesting too, because like a lot of people don't necessarily think about women as like really capable of abuse or like being formative to like the creation of a serial killer. So I do think that is interesting, but at the same time, it just always feels, I think traumatic childhood just like captures it so much more cleanly, because it just felt like misogyny, whether or not like the mother actually did bad things, you know?
Ooh.
Yeah.
So I guess my question, and you know, you don't remember, if you don't remember all the details, that's fine. But is there one specific true crime that is like your top, like, this is my favorite, I will love to tell people about this, this is the one?
That's hard because I have like an index in my brain of different cases.
Just like scrolling through.
Like
yeah.
Okay. I think the one that, oh my goodness, the one that I find the most disturbing out of the ones that I have, you know, read about. Oh God, and there are so many, but I would honestly have to say that it is between Marcus Wesson and David Parker Ray. The toy box killer, he's also known as a toy box killer, David Parker Ray. Marcus Wesson was the leader. He created like a cult, and it was full of, he created a cult based off of his own religion that he made, saying that, you know, Jesus Christ was a vampire, and infusing like elements of Satanism and with Christianity and adding vampires into the mix. So he created this religion, and there was physical, mental, verbal abuse going on. There was also acts of pedophilia, which this episode, I forgot to mention, warning, like,
Ooh,
the
yeah.
stuff we're discussing is very heavy. If
Yes.
you do not want to listen to this, you are not required to stay here. Take care of yourself, take care of your needs. Don't worry about us. We'll be here next week with another episode about true crime. But week after that, I promise, we're going back to the regular like schedule. Like, it's okay. But, this
So back
Marcus
to,
Wesson case.
Vampire Jesus.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Vampire Jesus. Thank you.
You sort of see how he got there, to be fair. Right? Like, he dies, he comes back. Kind of a vampire.
Yeah.
The other stuff, I don't really see how he got there.
Yeah, no. There were acts of pedophilia, incest,
Oof.
and he created like this family cult and like essentially kidnapped a couple people.
Mm-hmm.
But he kept the women under like strict dress codes and everything, so when they would go out they'd have to be completely covered. So he kind of introduced elements that he cherry-picked from Islam, and oh my goodness. But I mean, what's even more is that this was a black man. Marcus Wesson was a black man. Marcus Wesson was not a white man. It's not a Pazuzu algorithm type of thing. But sorry, I'm like,
I was like, Pazuzu algorithm. Like, what is this episode, dog? Like, what?
Oh my god.
But in the end, because somebody found out about what was going on in the house, he killed his family and didn't kill himself, even though he was supposed to do like a murder-suicide if anyone found out.
Yeah, that's like, he sounds like he would have been a family annihilator, which usually they do. It ends by suicide when it comes to family annihilators. I also think it's just really interesting because there aren't that many Black serial killers.
Exactly.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
Well, speaking of like family annihilators, I feel like we do have to mention John List, who went undetected for years, like literally decades. So basically, he was losing his job, and he had gotten this house for his family. He was like renting it, and like bills are piling up, and rather than telling his family like, I can't afford to be the only breadwinner, like I don't have a job, like I got fired, all this stuff, he just killed his whole family. And then went on the run and was discovered in Colorado decades later.
It feels like every time a serial killer is involved, they're somehow found in Colorado or Florida. Like, those are the two cases.
Yeah.
Well,
oh my
I am
gosh.
double locking my
But
door
he had
tonight.
already like remarried, assumed a new identity and everything, and nobody knew.
And I think that's the thing that really
crazy.
like I think that this is the thing that like makes me a little obsessed with it, especially because of like the way the United States is run. Like, we're technically all separate like nations who have decided to be united, right? Like, that's like we function as nation states independently. Not, I'm not going to get into federal government stuff here, but like like there's so much lack of information across state lines that like it is really easy for people in America to just go to another state and assume a new identity and assume a new life. And it's easier when you're white. It's far easier when you're white.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, Samuel Little, he went from state to state. He's one of the more like well-known Black. Yes, if that's all true. Right. I'm just saying, because he could be like the confession killer. But
Ray
his
like,
memory,
what's happening?
yeah, but no, okay, Samuel Little, his memory is absolutely mind-blowing. So he's claimed that he's killed like 93 people across around like 20 different states. And in the interviews that he was doing with the FBI, he drew the faces of the victims, described what they were wearing, what they smelled like, what their names were, like the information that they had shared with him. Like, it's absolutely crazy. And like the detail in his drawings, they were able to match a bunch of these like Jane Doe cases.
Yeah.
But he died actually in December of
Like this
2020.
past, wow.
He was
Yeah.
confessing to crimes, and like the FBI was actually contacting a lot of people in cold cases to try to confirm. I actually know someone who was contacted, which I like won't reveal their details.
Yeah.
But like for some context, Ray, the confession killer is like a really well-known serial killer who like no one's really sure how much people he really killed, but ultimately like he just started like confessing and helping the police, and they would get him sodas and milkshakes all the time, and he like
A strawberry milkshake every single day.
yeah, so like
This white boy was confessing to crimes up and down that he had no information about, and they were literally feeding information to him, and he'd be like, yeah, I did this.
And this is what, and this is, yeah, this is stuff that he did, basically. It's not other people. He wasn't Tekashi 69ing people. Like, he was literally just telling on himself, like, oh yeah, I did that once.
No, not even. No, because like then I think at first maybe some of them were true confessions, but then he realized like how much like power and freedom he would gain by working with the police, and so he just started confessing, and then all of these detectives
and all the attention he got.
All the attention, and then all these detectives were like, I'm going to close a bunch of cold cases. And so like it's really ended up being like sad for a lot of the families who like were told this person killed your loved one, to then find out that it's more likely that he didn't. So like then they felt like they had closure, and then that closure is taken away from them.
Yikes. It's just not it's not cool at all. Which
right.
I guess like
Henry Louis Wallace. There we go. I was like, Henry Wallace, Henry Louis Wallace. That's the name of the confession killer. But there were days that he was like confessing to doing things when it was physically impossible for him to be in Florida one day and Minnesota the next day.
Yeah.
So that's when I think they started to like put together that it couldn't be true.
Yeah.
But I think he confessed to like almost 100 cases before they caught on. And so like then when Samuel Little came out, they're like, so this is the actual real like prolific serial killer who has very intense memories. And I'm very still curious to see how that's all going to play out now that he's dead, and if they're able to confirm things. I hope so. They're able to, for like the sake of the family.
Yeah. And I guess like that's for me, and this is just going towards like the negative side of like true crimes. I guess for me, there are two reasons why I kind of like strayed away from true crimes podcasts and stuff like that. One was that I kind of like horror movies, but I do like, I'll get like a shiver down my spine if I ever see like a horror movie and it's like based in wherever you are, and you're like, oh, like, because there have been like a bunch of like horror movies. I think like The Strangers was like one that I remember clearly that was like based in Virginia, and I'm like, but I'm in Virginia. What? And I just like panicked, and like, definitely like I kind of get the horror film or the horror feel because these are actual people and they are just born the exact same way as everyone else, and so then you start seeing like how they became this way, and I kind of see like that allure behind true crimes. But I think the biggest kind of like turn off / like turn away for me was watching When They See Us on Netflix. If anyone hasn't seen that, please watch it. It kind of goes through a 4-part miniseries of the Central Park Five. 5 teenage African-American boys who were wrongfully accused of murdering and raping a white female jogger in the streets of New York in the late 80s, early 90s. And basically were sent to jail for, half, if not like their full lifetimes until they got out in the early like 2012. I don't know. Well, it was like recently they got released. And so one of the main investigators, which I found out about, was the creator of true crime books, which were then adapted into a TV series, which is now like Law and Order SVU. So everyone who I told about that, they're like, dang, now I can't watch Law. I was like, yep, now you can't watch Law and Order.
I never watched it.
But like, I think that's where most people got like their fix on like true crimes. And then I was
ripped
like,
from the headlines.
Yeah, and it kind of shows like, you know, definitely like true crime stories and true crime podcasts start to show like, I'm going to say this nicely, the cracks within the investigation system, where if a police officer like, you know, starts trying to connect dots and they're like, oh, my job's done, this is easy, or if like they're just blindly not looking for the correct amount of evidence. Some of these cases can go on for years. And just like you said, like, you know, if they start relying on other people, like, you know, the confession killer saying that he did this murder, and then the police go to the family and they say like, oh, like we finally found the killer that like, you know, murdered your family member, and they're finally relieved, only for years later to find out that it was a lie. It's just like, for me, that like just weighs heavy. Like, I'm not even part of that family, but it like weighs heavy for me to like hear that kind of stuff and just be not angry at the system in which it's placed in. But, you know, that's just kind of where it is. And like, yeah, it just kind of shows the fallacies of like authority figures and just investigative stuff. Because like, I think there was like one other episode that I watched or that I listened to from My Favorite Murder, and I was like, how do they not put two and two together? Like, you know, because I don't know the exact name of like the case it was, but I was like, y'all, like, come on, like if it's in a neighborhood, if they're just chilling there, if they like acting weird, book them. Like, I'm just like, yo, like you know that something's going on. Like, why don't you just like do a welfare check or something like that? But
not
like,
exactly.
I mean,
not
like,
really.
You can get that impulse, but I do see that being disproportionately used against Black and brown neighbors, though.
Yeah, and like I feel like I'm like in a horror movie like perspective where I'm just like, no, get him. It's that person. Like, he did it, you know. And so that's kind of where I get like lost in like my frustrations of like, how did they not know this?
Yes, I agree with how did they not know this, because there are so many cases where the evidence points to a person, it looks like it's that person, DNA, everything, and they still don't book that person. And you're just like, why? Why? You have direct evidence that ties this person to this crime. And that's where we really see the fail of a lot of police work and investigation. And one of my main problem with those shows is that it glorifies cops. It paints them as these, you know, heroic people who are doing the good justice and finding the bad guys and locking them up and getting those convictions. And I'm like, that's not how the process goes. And to glorify people who are also committing acts of brutality against BIPOC people every single day, I'm not going to tap into that. I'm not going to tap into that, because you're glorifying someone who's actively doing harm. And the only people they want to pay attention to is the ones that are going to get them the cover story. That's it. That investment is not there for a lot of people. It's not. It just isn't. So that's my main frustration with those shows, is that it glorifies and paints these people as true heroes of justice.
And
It's
are you
like,
talking about?
that's not
Are you
SVU,
about,
NCIS,
okay.
like all this, like good cop, bad cop thing. And even just like the show Cops, like following cops and showing cops doing.
I cannot believe that.
Anyway. This is like a whole can of worms that we're just opening up to. Okay. So I guess in our next episode, which you want to follow with us as we cross over, I guess we'll just be talking about more true crimes, you know, kind of the culture / like the media of like blowing up a big story, recent, you know, true crimes that like I feel as though are going to get put on the spot as like a movie or a you know lifetime time special or whatever. And just kind of talk about that. So
yeah.
yeah.
Should I still share my like quote unquote favorite?
Oh yes! Oh my gosh!
That's the problem with true crime is that like you start on one case and then there's all these tangents, which works perfectly
so much unpacking to do.
for my mind, honestly. But I think so for me, the case of Jodi Arias or the kidnappings of Ariel Castro are going to be two of my favorite. The kidnappings of Ariel Castro, I remember being really shocked because like we've talked about, like most serial killers and like serial kidnappers tend to be white people, and you can like really just deconstruct how whiteness like plays a huge role into like the serial killer pathology. But obviously that's not every case, right? There's still going to be people of color who are engaging in this kind of harmful behavior. And I remember it just being so shocking when like Ariel Castro was Puerto Rican, and that like, yeah, it was a big deal for the Puerto Rican community because it was also like kind of the thing where it's like, ah, damn, like now we got a Puerto Rican in the news doing a really big crime, and this is just gonna like foster more like rhetoric about how like violent Puerto Ricans are, right? Like, which to a lot of people now like doesn't seem like a big rhetoric, but like as recently as like the 90s and early aughts, and even today, it was like very publicly talked about how violent Puerto Ricans were, especially because of their association with New York City, which at the time was kind of like a lawless land for anyone of any race. So that I would say that one, and then Jodi Arias, I think is just so fascinating the levels to which she went to kill her ex, and like there's this whole involvement with like the Mormon church. She was trying to be like a good Mormon.
Hold on. This is a good cliffhanger to kind of go off on because I really want to know. Yeah, because I was like, whoa, like.
Yeah.
And so
she was fine too. I'm like, damn, girl, you really was like that shit crazy.
So this is what we're gonna do. Next episode, we will jump right into this. I'm excited to hear about this and go from there. Oh my gosh. Like this is just so many things. I'm like, what? Like blowing my mind.
We may have
right, time to go put you onto some new podcasts.
Yeah, shit. Apparently. It's like, whoa.
Do your homework.
But yes, hopefully I'm gonna find those cases. If not, find the podcast that talks about them. But
alrighty,
we will be back, not on this channel, but on another channel, on the next episode of
What Are You? Hey!